On today's show, are they overrated or underrated? We'll talk about 3 more draft-eligible prospects on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hattie Kalakash, QMJHL and Crossover Scout for Elite Prospects, with Sebastian High, USHL and Crossover Scout for Elite Prospects. And on today's show, we'll be breaking down 3 more draft-eligible prospects and asking the question of, are they underrated or overrated? We'll start off in the first segment with Jack Ivankovic. For each prospect, by the way, we'll see where they're ranked, where we have them, and what the discrepancy is and why. So first segment is Jack Ivankovic, second segment is William Moore, and third segment is Cameron Reid. Before we get into any of that, though, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. If you're watching on YouTube, as usual, remember to like and subscribe. Let us know in the comments what you think of the episode. And then if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rate and review, and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. So let's get started right away here with Jack Ivankovic in the first segment, the goaltender who is 6 foot. And I think that's where the issue starts. Unfortunately, he doesn't seem to be ranked very high by scouts on the NHL side. On NHL Central Scouting, I believe he's a B grade. Is that right?
B or C. He's definitely not an A grade.
Got it, yeah. So, let's start with the size of the numbers so far this season with Brampton in the OHL. Talk me through all that to get us started here.
Yeah, so he is the indisputable starter now that Ryerson Leanders was moved on in the offseason with Brampton. He's played 13 games so far and sported a .906 save percentage, but those numbers are definitely skewed by the fact that Brampton's defensive core is a bit of a tire fire in terms of preventing high danger chances against. I caught one live viewing of Ivankovic's as well against the Ottawa 67s. A game where he conceded 5 goals, but also conceded 48 shots. So, and the dam kind of just broke in the third period when Porter Martone took a 5-minute manger and was ejected from the game. And on that power play, the score was ramped up from just a very tight, low event, 2-1 game to a bit of a blowout by the time that the final whistle blew. But overall, this is a very intelligent goaltender with refined mechanics in whether it be his footwork, his puck tracking. He's a very intelligent and reliable goaltender in the crease. He is quite small for a goaltender, though, as you mentioned, listed at 5'11", not even 6 feet, and 179 pounds. Though I know that a lot of his family members are like 6'3", 6'4", so there's a lot of like big guys in the family, but so maybe you get a later growth spurt from Ivankovic, which would, I think, certainly change the outlook of where he gets drafted on draft day. But in terms of goaltending quality, this is one of the best in the draft class, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, he's just such a good puck tracker. Every single, he sees everything. Like literally every single thing happening on the ice is well within his range of vision and awareness. On top of that, he moves really well in the crease. Very good lateral mobility. He's able to get from post to post quickly. His depth control is really good as well. On point shots, he gets a bit deeper, allows himself the time to react and uses reflexes when it comes to deflections or screen shots or that kind of stuff. And when it comes to challenging, forwards one-on-one on breakaways or even 2-on-1s, he's not afraid to get aggressive because he knows that his footwork will get him across the crease if something else happens. So very aggressive on shooters as well. Good depth control, good post control, good post integration. His technique is really good. Yeah. There's just so many different areas that Ivankovic really kind of has nailed down. But above all, it's really the mental attributes with Ivankovic. And I think, when I'm scouting goalies, which, goalies are voodoo, but there's a science to it as well. When I'm scouting goalies, what I'm really looking for are those mental attributes. How do they react after a goal against? Are they able to, play with a 1-goal lead the same way they're able to play when they're down by a goal? Does their performance change at all? Do they tend to chain together bad sequences, or are they able to back up a bad goal with really good performances? On top of all the awareness, the tracking, the reflexes, the instincts, Those things matter to me a lot when I'm looking at goaltenders, because technique, you can work on technique. Ask any goalie coach, they can rework any goalie and make them at least technically sound. But it's the mental attributes and the inherent physical tools. Are they big? Are they mobile? Those things matter a lot. And for me, at least, I don't know if you agree, Jack Ivankovic ticks so many boxes outside of size, doesn't he? Right?
He really does. And I think one big element beyond just the intelligence and the technique with Ivankovic, he's a battler. He never gives up on plays. He's really intense in the crease. He stays square to pucks so consistently, even in really wild scrambles. He's a player that has that combination of intelligence, composure, and just that battle to pounce on loose pucks. He's not afraid to enter the fray of a big puck battle right outside his crease. And overall, I think this is a goaltender that I view very, very well. He's a player I've loved watching. He's not quite at the level of a Josh Ravensbergen so far this season in terms of NHL upside. Ravensbergen has a lot of these same elements with the size on top of that and a just really steep progression curve. I mean, he was a camp invite just a year or so ago, and he's now a top prospect in the NHL draft. But still, I think Ivankovic is probably the next best draft eligible netminder in the CHL, and maybe overall as well. He's a player I've really grown to like a lot, and my live viewing certainly supported that. I was watching him during extended sequences, and he's a player that's just he always has his head in the game. He never gives up on a play, and he was just as competitive after the score line got really wide and it was like a 4-1 game as when it was a tie 1-1 game. So he's a player that I've liked a lot for his consistency. Beyond that, what do you think that that his overall ranking is going to end up as this season? Because I think we're probably going to be higher on him than NHL scouting staffs will be. Public scouting overall is a bit more leniency when it comes to undersized netminders. But do you see him as a player that can still get drafted in the second round, or do we see a Ryerson Leanders 2.0 where he falls into the 5th, 6th, 7th round range?
I think that with Ivankovic, the skill is just undeniable. With the unders, you have a couple areas where you can say, okay, this is an issue, right? Like he was a very good puck tracker, kind of same as Ivankovic in that regard. I say Ivankovic's a better puck tracker, more aware. The composure with Ivankovic is better. The footwork is better. The mobility, the depth control, all that is better. I still think he ends up as a 2nd to 3rd rounder. I don't think he slips all the way to the 6th. But if you look at public rankings right now, the highest he can find him is on Sam Cosentino's rankings. He's at 22nd overall. He's at 25th on FC Hockey's, 32nd on Bukala's over at Sportsnet as well. But he's not on a lot of rankings, which isn't good news because he can be very high on 2-3 rankings. That's great, but NHL public scouting doesn't seem the same. There's some questions over at other rankings as well. It's kind of a good indication of where people stand on him. You're either really high on him or really low on him. It seems like NHL Central Scouting's pretty low on him, and we know that a lot of teams base themselves off Central Scouting's list to kind of sift through and figure out who they're going to pick where. I still think that at the end of the day, Ivankovic's good enough to be a pick around the 50s, according to NHL scouts. But I would take him in my first round. He's an incredibly solid goaltender with really, really good skills. I don't see the harm in it. And, you talk about Ravensbergen. How many southpaw goalies do we have in the NHL? Right? Like, there's a reason for that. Southpaw goalies tend to struggle a bit more because NHL shooters' habits tend to favor left-catching goaltenders. With Ravensbergen being a right-catching goalie, as good as all the other skills are, it is a concern because as good as some southpaw goalies have been, none have really managed to be NHL starters long-term, right?
There's definitely been a couple exceptions, but you definitely see a much bigger lean to left-catching goalies than left-shot shooters, for instance, right? Like there's a lot more left-catching goalies where when you are a right-catching goalie, you are very different, and obviously things change in how also a team's defensive structure functions in front of a right-catching goaltender. But I personally wouldn't be too concerned about it. I think that Ravensbergen is skilled enough, he's big enough, he's smart enough, that I think that he's just the best goaltending prospect in this draft class at this stage, but Ivankovic is certainly my next favorite of the bunch, though I haven't done over like a tremendous amount of depth scouting on goaltenders of the class so far. I've caught like one like Love Harenstam viewing, and that's about it among goaltenders in this draft class. But Ivankovic is one that has just constantly stood out to me, and that goes back to his D-1 season as well. He was fantastic last year with Brampton, and the fact that he was splitting the crease 1-to-1 with Ryerson Leanders in his draft year, I thought was also quite impressive. So a lot to like here with Ivankovic. But in the next segment, we're going to take a leap over to my region with a player by the name of William Moore. And we'll be asking the question, is he overrated or underrated? Following this first segment, where I think we quite clearly established that we think that Jack Ivankovic is underrated. But we'll see where William Moore lands in the next segment. But first, a quick word from our sponsors over at Game Time.
If you're looking to buy cheap tickets last minute to any event, Game Time is the best place to secure them. Game Time's safe, secure, incredibly easy to use, and they're obsessed with saving you money. They've got deals at every step of the way to make sure that you get the best price. Last minute deals, flash deals, zone deals, and they've also got the Game Time guarantee to make sure you get the best price. If you find a ticket in the same section and row for less than what Game Time has to offer you, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Now, I use Game Time all the time when it comes to finding tickets last minute to events. My schedule changes around a ton, so I can find myself with an afternoon free. And it's super easy to just pull up Game Time, get a ticket, and you're in the arena by the hour. And it's not just for sports, comedy, theater, you name it, they've got it all. Anything that requires a ticket, you can get over at Game Time. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code Locked On NHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, super simple. You just create an account, use code Locked On NHL for $20 off. So download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Alrighty, so moving on to the second segment, we'll be talking about Will Moore. We just talked about Jack Ivankovic and determined that he's underrated by NHL circles. We're really big fans. Both of us are probably going to have him in our top 40s. But now let's talk about Will Moore, because he went into the season ranked really, really highly, and I believe is an A-grade prospect as well on NHL Central Scouting's list, right?
He is indeed. He's a 6'2", 161-pound left shot forward. He's listed as a center, but he's been playing more on the wing than down the middle so far this season with the NTDP. And he's a very divisive prospect. On the one hand, in terms of pure tools, pure skill, he might be a top 12, top 13 player in this draft class. In terms of consistency, he is not among the top 70 players in this draft class. There's a lot to be desired still in his play with the program so far this season. And there's a reason that the rankings have also been all over the place with this guy. He's been ranked as high as 9th overall and as low as 45th overall. So a big range of where he has landed so far in rankings. He's at 23rd on our October board at Elite Prospects. And I think he'll probably be dropping a little bit by the time our next board comes around because he still hasn't quite kicked into gear. And I think the main thing with Will Moore is just that divergence between the tools and the ability to leverage them, even against the USHL competition. He is very static. He's a very passive player, not a play driver by any stretch of the imagination. He's a complementary winger at this stage in his development, has some decent elements of skill. He's a good puck handler, a good skater, has a good shot, some nice flashes of playmaking ability as well, but it just hasn't all come together. There's no layering of tools, really. He's able to catch and release a puck and fire it like short side top shelf while really selling the far side shot and really show that upside as a goal scorer. And then the same game, he will just either not shoot the puck at all again or just spam shots from low danger areas and just try to get anything through on goal without much thought behind it. So a lot of inconsistency with this player. And I know that in your crossover viewings, you've also seen a similar level of frustration that I have in my regional viewings with Will Moore, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he's just, like you said, frustrating. I mean, you can see the skill level. You can see the the awareness and the vision offensively is there, but just, man, like, move your feet, man. Like, just get your feet moving. Do, like, create something. He's definitely got. He's not a poor skater either. When he does get his feet moving, he's actually pretty good at getting around opponents, at upping the pace of play. But the thing is, it's okay to glide. There's no problem with gliding, but you need to throw in some changes of pace from time to time, keep defenders on their toes so that when you do start gliding, they don't expect it. We just haven't seen that from Will Moore so far this season. So for me personally, I can't grade him as an A prospect. I think there's only this season, I think there's only about 20-ish A grade prospects, and Will Moore is not on that list.
No.
He's certainly a high B grade. The skill level's still there. I still think he can be a late first rounder, but I really, really don't see the bona fide top 20 talent in him. And it's unfortunate because it's a lot to do with decision making, with awareness, with processing, with skill,
intensity too.
Right.
Like complete lack of that.
Exactly. And in the NHL, you need to be able to default to working hard. There aren't a lot of not hardworking prospects in the NHL, forwards in the NHL, especially when it comes to even top 6 talent. Even Patrick Kane's able to back check and get involved on the forecheck and win some battles. It's not frequent, but at least it happens, right? And when he doesn't have the puck, there is some level of involvement. You need to be able to push the pace, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's been one thing just completely lacking from Will Moore's game so far this season. Defensively, he is the biggest glider on the entire NTDP. He rarely gets involved in the defensive zone apart from what is like really within his range of where his stick can reach to from where he's currently standing or gliding in a particular vicinity. But he's certainly a player that is mainly waiting for his teammates to create a turnover and then get the puck to him, that he can be an outlet and then move the puck up ice. And then there's also a lack of motor to then catch up to that play that he sends up ice to be a trailing threat in the offensive zone. So he's a player that takes himself out of play by just not really engaging his feet. So if he were able to get his feet moving consistently in all 3 zones and also have a level of thought behind what he's trying to do with moving his feet, then I could see an A-grade prospect out of this player. But I have barely seen a shift or two of him doing that even consistently through 50 seconds, let alone in a full period or a full game so far this season. So a lot of inconsistency, and especially I think an element of frustration is also circumstantial. This is a team devoid of game-breaking talent, of players that can just grab the bull by the horns and influence the game, change the game, and break things open offensively. And Will Moore is one of the few players on the lineup that has the skill, has the ability to do so. So the lack of that capacity this season, the lack of the intensity to support that potential game-breaking skill has been especially frustrating because it's been a skill vacuum at times with the NTDP. And also a big issue with the program this season is a lack of cohesion and chemistry among players. And Will Moore is not a player that helps with that. He hasn't found great chemistry with his teammates so far this season. He relies on them to bring intensity, to do the dirty work, and just tries to find little pockets of space and to do things with the puck on his stick when he gets it in the offensive zone. But it often is a low pace. And it's very clear that this is a player that still has a lot of habits ingrained from his GTHL days. This is his second season with the program. He's playing with the U17s last year, but against the USHL competition last season, he had 25 points in 35 games. And even that level of offensive involvement has been more limited this season. We haven't seen a progression really from his D-1 season to his draft year. So a lot of question marks, a lot of reasons that I think that he's an overrated prospect still at this point, because so many boards, whether it be Bob McKenzie or Craig Button or the Hockey News, they all still have him top 15. I struggle to see the arguments to support a top 15 grade at this point. And even in that late first round, I think he's closer to 30 than he is to 20. A lot of question marks still. I personally wouldn't be averse if he fell out of our top 32 at EP for our next ranking meeting. I'm not going to be the one pushing for him in that spot. He may get some popular support because the skill is probably better than a lot of other players in that range, but there's so many other things lacking that I would still struggle to support that kind of push. So a player I'm still left with more questions than answers with so far this season. I'd love to see him really take that step in the back half of the year, because there is so much to like with this player, but still, I mean, there's a lot of questions here. And where would you have him ranked? Because I think for me currently, he's kind of a 30 to 35 range prospect.
About the same. Yeah, just not really convinced with the level of quality that he brings. But yeah, no, maybe 25 to 32. I still think he's a late first rounder. I just don't think he's anywhere near the top 15 like he's being ranked so far. So now that we established that, we'll move on to Cameron Reid in the third segment, the young defenseman from the OHL, who's one of the top producers from this draft class so far. We'll talk about his game in detail and whether he's overrated or underrated in just a sec. But just before, a quick word from our sponsors at FanDuel.
Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need all in one place to place live bets on the NFL. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the exact same page where you place your bets. Whether you want to take your swings on American football or European football with the Champions League, the choice really is yours. Or perhaps you prefer tennis or golf. Or if you're listening to this podcast, you may just be a hockey fan. Whatever sport floats your boat, FanDuel has something to offer you. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Alrighty, so let's close things off here in a final segment with Cameron Reid, the young defenseman from the OHL. Has been really impressive so far in early in the season. We'll talk about the details of his game, how well he's been progressing, kind of in terms of his year-to-year progress in the OHL. He's a draft eligible. He's 6 foot, 175 pounds. So I mean, average size. He's currently all over the place in terms of rankings. He's as low as 63rd overall in FC Hockey's. He's as high as 17th overall in Craig Button's. So we'll talk about his game in detail, but to talk you through the point totals, he plays for the Kitchener Rangers. He's got 20 points in 21 games as a draft-eligible defenseman. He's also an assistant captain for the Kitchener Rangers. The Rangers, who are kind of, they're doing okay in the last couple of weeks. They put together, a 6-game win streak, and Cameron Reid had a big part to play in that. I mean, he had 3 multi-point games in a row in that little streak that they had at the start of November. Talk me through his game and what you've liked from him so far.
I've loved the 3-zone impact of this player. He's a very refined and mature player. Defensively, there's a lot of details that he already has in his game that you love to see from a player that is not the biggest defenseman, certainly, but he's a solid skater. He's balanced in all 3 zones. His stick work against the rush, his timing of closing gaps, his ability on retrievals are all clear areas of strength. Offensively, he's a really natural activator. He's not trying to necessarily make a Hail Mary play every single time he moves up in the offensive zone, but he rotates really well with forwards when they have extended periods on the cycle or on the power play to just change the angles in the offensive zone, try to find those passing lanes to dangerous areas. And he's a player that also fends off contact really well. He plays through physical contact nicely, despite not being the biggest guy. And overall, he brings everything that you could want in a player that could maybe be a second pairing defenseman long term. Just being able to play consistent, solid hockey in all 3 zones with flashes of offensive skill as well. The skating is really a key area of strength. And I think that with time, he's also going to add a lot more explosiveness to his stride, because right now he's very agile. He's very fluid, all 4 directions, really nice looking skater, but there can be a little bit of a lack of pop sometimes in his acceleration. But that's something that will come with time when he actually adds some weight to his 174-pound frame. But what have you liked in his game so far this season, and where do you think he ends up on draft day?
I've absolutely loved the rush defense. I've found him very interesting when it comes to the way that he shepherds play to the sides and prevents middle entries. The mobility really shines in those areas where it's a lot more about fluidity than pure pace or speed or pop, right? It's a lot more about How does he match footwork? How does he keep a strong gap even when a player is changing directions and stopping up and accelerating on him? Very, very capable in those areas. I found that very interesting for him. But also, once he breaks up those plays either in the neutral zone or the defensive zone, he quickly turns plays offensively. He's able to make breakout passes incredibly effectively and reacts quickly in those scenarios. And after that, after making that breakout pass, he follows his pass into the offensive zone. He's not afraid to push up, to join the rush as a fourth forward. I found that area of his game very interesting, and the strong span that he had in the late October, early November spot. In terms of where he gets picked, I think NHL circles are going to be lower on him than we are. Craig Button is less about matching what NHL teams think and more about his personal liking, which is what rankings are supposed to be. But he's not on Bob McKenzie's rankings. He's missing from a lot of rankings, including, Jason Bacala's and some of these other guys. I believe he was a B grade on Central Scouting's list.
Yeah.
I think he gets picked in the mid-second round at best, which is a shame because I think he's got first-round talent. I think he would be in my late first round, but I think teams, especially at his size, with his lack of pure strength, with his lack of, like I said, pop in terms of his skating. When you're this undersized defenseman, they want to see the Lane Hudson-White shifts. They want to see the elite playmaking skill. Reid's a lot more about efficiency, and at that size, being efficient isn't enough. So that's my read on him. What's your take, though?
Yeah, I think I would disagree slightly on that. I could definitely see him being picked in the later end of the first round, say 20 to 32 range. I think is certainly where he could go. I think his overall range is probably closer to like 25 to 45 if I had to hedge my bets at this stage. But he's so intelligent, and I think a lot of what he brings also in terms of solidifying in a defensive zone and being one of the most reliable blue liners on Kitchener this season will do a lot to compensate for those lack of perhaps elite level tools that make undersized defensemen stand out. And because he is such a solid skater in all four directions and is able to layer stick and body really nicely against the rush, I do think that you're going to see an NHL team be interested in him in the later end of the first round. And I mean, even Sportsnet and Sam Cosentino have him ranked 26th overall at this point, and that's typically a ranking that is a bit more accurate in terms of what actually ends up happening on draft day than Craig Button's board. So I could see it happening. That said, in terms of where we have him, where Elite Prospect might have him, I think it's possible he ends up as a top 20 guy on our next board. I think it's entirely within the realm of possibility. There's going to be a lot of public support for him among our scouting staff. I know Mitch and Lauren are massive fans of this player in terms of that combination of intelligence and physical tools and just how reliable he is in all three zones, whether he's defending, whether it be in motion defending or against the cycle. He does not get boxed out easily, has good leverage mechanics. There's so much to like with this player. There are very few glaring holes in his game. And that said, for a player with not so many holes in his game, what do you think his niche is going to end up being at the NHL level? What is he going to become a specialist of some kind, or just like a Brett Kulak style of do everything very, very well without necessarily being a big standout in any single shift?
You read my mind. Brett Kulak really comes to mind when I'm watching Cam Reid, maybe with a bit more offensive ability. He's able to shoot from the point with good timing. He opens up shooting lanes really well from the point. But I think, just being very efficient in multiple areas while being a stalwart in terms of rush defending is going to be enough to make the NHL in some capacity, especially if he adds an inch and a couple pounds to his frame, becomes capable of handling, hard physical forecheckers, because he's going to be spending a lot of time retrieving retrieving dump-ins, right? Like if he plays on a deep pair, it's going to be with a more, how do you say this, kind of more physically inclined but less mobile defenseman. So I'm thinking of the Edmonton Oilers, some of the guys that Brett Kulak spent time with over the years. Early on in his career, Evan Bouchard was that guy. Bouchard was pushing up, and Kulak was kind of rovering behind. He's played with Darnell Nurse at times. He's played with Matthias Ekholm in some capacity. And more often than not, Kulak was the one retrieving the dump-ins behind his net, while the other defenseman kind of I mean, played interference, right? We've seen that on dump-ins. One player challenges a dump or the forechecker, the other one retrieves. So I think that's probably going to be his role at the NHL level, but I don't see necessarily a niche per se. He's a very well-rounded defenseman with a lot of different areas that are good. But we'll see how his progression goes. That wraps things up for today's show. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, remember to like and subscribe. Let us know in the comments what you think of the episode and what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rate and review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, remember to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports. And make sure to tune in for our future shows as we continue our prospect coverage for the month of November. This has been Hadi Kalikesh with Sebastian High, and we hope you tune in next time.